You are listening to the Goodnet Effect, Echoes of Inspiration, a podcast by Goodnet, a part of the Arison Group.
Hello and welcome to the Goodnet Effect, Echoes of Inspiration. I'm your new host, Erica Jackson, and we're here at Essence of Life Radio, which is part of the Arison Group. And I just want to say, I'm so excited. This is the first time that I'm hosting this podcast. And this is a special place where we meet inspirational people that are changing the world and the way we think for the better. Now, Goodnet is an online, inspirational, good news media platform founded by businesswoman and philanthropist Sherry Arison. It has a mission of sharing positive stories, stories of personal growth, and that inspire people to go out into the world and create real positive change, which is so important. And with that, I would like to welcome our guest to the podcast, Mory Fontanez. She is an intuitive life and leadership coach, and she's also an author. She has a book that just came out called Higher Self. And we're going to dive right into that and so much more. Mory, congratulations on your new book. Welcome to the podcast. And I want to start off by asking you why it was so important for you to write this book.
Thank you so much for having me. I have to say, I follow Goodnet on Instagram, and in watching your content, really, over the years has helped me realize, oh my God, we do not get enough good news in our feeds. And good news is as much news as is the bad news. And I think that that's actually part of the reason I wrote this book right now, because we right now are, and have been for a very long time, are being inundated by fear messages. And those messages come from all sorts of sources. They do come from the media, they come from our leaders. And what we're taught is that fear is vigilance, that paying attention to fearful information is what makes us intelligent, that we're naive if we believe in the good things. And that is really dangerous, because what we're seeing is that inundation of fear-based messages is causing us to disconnect from our own inner knowing, from our own wisdom. And when we disconnect from that wisdom, we are more likely to buy into the fear. The fear is really there to trigger us into a fight or flight response. And when we buy into that, we're more likely to be divided. We're more likely to be divided from ourselves. We're more likely to lack trust in each other. And that's where you start to see the dangers of some of the stuff we're seeing going on right now happen. So this book is really meant to be my coaching method, the work that I do one-on-one with clients. In a manual, I've handed you a roadmap to say, here's a reminder of who you are. And the reality is that the answers you seek are not somewhere out there. They're within you. And if we can remember that, then we will rekindle that flame. And to me, it looks like little lights going on around the world. And because as we remember, oh, I have the wisdom to know what to do next, and I am full of inherent self-worth and dignity, then it will be harder to control you through fear. And the more that each of us remembers that, then the stronger we all are as a society, and the more fulfilled we are as humans living this life.
And our community here at Goodnet is passionate about self-growth. So, what are the big takeaways that readers can gain from reading your book?
The first and foremost is that if you really want to lead your life tapped into this wisdom, or intuition is another word for it, it's most important to be able to decipher that from your fear voice. So the first third of the book is written in a way to remind the reader of the moments in time when they chose other people's projections, other people's limitations and fears, even if that's mom or dad, well-meaning when we're very little, trying to protect us. The book really helps you identify the moments where, oh, that fear thought blocked my intuitive knowing. And in doing that, it's a really actionable way to decide, oh, I am going to choose the intuitive thought because I know the difference between what a fear thought feels like and an intuitive thought feels like. So some of the actionable tools are really about discernment, deciphering the difference between the two, and also learning that our fear thoughts are just younger parts of ourselves trapped in old stories. And when we're able to see those aspects of us, like, I have a fear thought about money because when I was little, my parents were divorced and my mom was a single mom and really worked hard and we didn't have a lot. And that little kid, she's about 9. And so every time, even now at 44, when something happens around money, which isn't actually on the face of it dangerous or scary, the 9-year-old grabs a hold of that information and is in full panic mode. And so I use my own method. I will literally, once I start to feel that panic, I'll be like, oh, there you are, little 9-year-old. And I'll be able to be in dialogue with her about it. So that's another tool is about learning how to give these limited thoughts back to the original believer, the younger self, and work with that younger self so that it's not in so much control of your life anymore.
And how do you follow your intuition with all the noise of limiting beliefs, societal pressure, and self-doubt?
Well, it really has to do with trust and faith. And I don't mean that in a metaphysical way. I mean that in a really practical way. I tell people all the time that our brains require evidence to believe. And so the best way to cultivate your relationship with your intuition is to start by just looking back at your life and asking yourself, what's a moment when I just knew something? And I couldn't explain why, but I just knew it. And it can be something small or it can be something life-changing. But go back and look at your life, first of all, and search for evidence there of where your intuition was really active and right. Look for what happened when you listened to it. As you start to do that, you can, in your life, as you hear this very calm, clear voice, follow its direction and continue to log the evidence. Oh, what happened when I paid attention to that? Or with me, I'm an intuitive, which just means that I'm paying attention to the unspoken signals and receiving messages. I will say those things out loud in a session. And when I see on my client's face this reaction of like, oh, wow, how did you know that? That's evidence for my brain. It's building the notion in my brain, oh, you can believe in this sensing ability that you have. So we really need to learn how to decipher between the fear and the intuition, but then start to act on the intuitive knowing and log the evidence for what happens when we listen.
And what about societal pressure? Because I think
Yeah.
that can block a lot of people from finding the courage within to follow their intuition.
Oh, it's so true. I think it's, that's part of this white noise that we talk about. We are beings that require belonging to feel psychologically safe. We, from the time that we were in tribes, needed to have belonging to survive because otherwise we were ousted and out there alone in the wilderness. So belonging is a very fundamental need that you have. And in that need, what you tend to do is look to others. What do they think? What are they saying? How are they acting? And I will then kind of mimic that. I think that there comes a point, and probably if you're listening and any part of you is like lighting up around this, there comes a point where living your life that way just becomes exhausting. Because what's happening is it's not in the reflection of your own truth. It's in the reflection of someone else's. And you know that deep down. Talk about intuition. You intuitively know if you're hearing these words and you're living that way, you know you are. And you know that you're tired. You know that you want more. You know that there's things you want to say that you're tired of keeping in. So that little, my mentor calls it divine discontent. That little thing inside you that's like, ugh, I don't like this feeling anymore. That's your signal that you're right. You do want belonging and you chose other people's version of the truth to get it, but you're now being invited to another way. And what I found in my own life is that once you begin to just start living boldly in that way and trusting your truth, saying it out loud, people are actually more magnetized to you. That's one of the illusions of fear, which is that if you be truly who you are and you follow your wisdom, that others will go away from you. But in fact, think about what's more confident and powerful than someone who just is like rooted in their knowing. You've met people like that. Those people are magnetic. So just know that if you believe that you have to go along with everyone else to get love, that that's an illusion. That's a limiting belief system that someone has given you. And that the reality is you're far more magnetic if you just stand in your truth.
Sherry Arison, who is not only the founder of Goodnet, but a best-selling author, has a quote from her book, The Doing Good Model, which is finding inner peace comes about when we are at peace with all of our parts, some which we can see and some which we cannot. And there's so much truth in this quote because everyone has the light and the shadow. It's part of being a human. So, how do you accept all of your parts, even the ones you might feel shame around, which could have started from a very young age? And why is this a crucial part of becoming your highest self?
If there's a shame part of me, if there's an envy part of me, if there's a guilty part of me, it's just a little kid. And so I ask my clients all the time, what would you say to your son or your daughter or a niece or a nephew or a younger sister or brother if they were speaking to themselves that way? If they hated themselves so much because of this thought that they had or this very human emotion that they had. And all of a sudden we soften, right? Because it's easier to imagine being loving and kind to another child. Well, all of those parts of you that are trapped in this shadow, those are just your younger selves. So, I love that quote because it is all of our parts. And to me, all of our parts sit along a spectrum. And this left side of this spectrum is all of our past parts. And so instead of being ashamed of them, we need to look directly at them and look at why are you stuck in that moment? What strategic limiting belief did you come up with to survive? Thank you for being brilliant enough to devise a strategy at 5 years old so that we could survive. So gratitude. And then also, now we're going to find a new way. And then along that spectrum over here on the right side, the way I imagine it is, that is where you start to become closer and closer to your higher self, that highest mind that is unencumbered by the trauma, the pain, the fear that happened in our lives in the past, but is existing in this knowing of, we are inherently worthy of all that we desire and guiding us towards that. So for me, our parts are really about bringing all of that together, the shadowy, fearful, younger selves and the clear, grounded, intuitive higher self.
And something that I found is healthy connections can, of course, be very healing, but some of the most powerful moments of transformation are the ones that are fully internal
Mm.
and that are not necessarily about fixing a relationship on the outside, but healing within. So, why is the inward journey essential to healing?
If you actually look at the essence of that word journey, it is about the experience of being on life's path, all of its twists and turns, and seeing every single aspect as something that is happening for your highest good, even if it is not the way you wanted it to turn out. And so that work inward is also a journey because you're not going to just go from A to B. You're not going to go do this work I talked about, find the 5-year-old, talk to her once, and then you're done, right? Healing is not linear. It is this kind of spiral path that goes upward. As you evolve, you come back to the same lesson at a higher consciousness or in a higher mind. And so if we can embrace that, I'm always going to be in dialogue with these younger selves. And these younger selves are going to show up in new ways as I experience new things in my life. And so therefore, I'm embracing the journey. I'm embracing the pathway that's unfolding rather than making this about this is going to be this outcome and this is how it's going to work, because then that's all about control and not actually the life experience that you're having.
A lot of times we make agreements that are rooted in trauma. What advice would you give for someone who's aware of their pattern, knows it's harmful, and desperately wants to break out of it?
First of all, if you have awareness that you're making these agreements subconsciously, that is half the battle. Truly, awareness is the key that unlocks all transformation. Once you have that awareness, the question that I want you to ask yourself is, what else is possible here? In this agreement, this subconscious agreement of people pleasing I've made, first of all, it definitely has a benefit or else I wouldn't have made it. But what is it costing me? What am I losing by being in this agreement? Get really clear with yourself. And then from that place of information, you can ask yourself, well, what does the opposite of this look like? What else is possible here? And when you do this exercise of, well, what's the opposite of people pleasing? Okay, your brain, your cynical self is going to be making everyone hate you, right? You're going to go as extreme as you want, but you get to be sort of like the investigative journalist in your own system. Okay, well, what would that do? And what are the benefits and the cons of that? And okay, well, what's the middle ground solution? So I think I'm really asking you to be in dialogue with yourself once you have the awareness, to be really, really clear what the cost of this agreement is, and to be accountable that you're going to keep choosing something that has a cost to it. And that instead, once your brain can identify a different approach, then it is possible. The only thing that's standing in your way is that you're afraid. And here's the thing about fear. Fear is a liar. So anything it's telling you is going to happen, most likely will not happen. And so it is up to you to find the courage to feel the fear and do the opposite thing anyway. That's the only way through.
And how do you know you've reached the point where you're finally living in full alignment with your highest self? What are some of the signs?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it's dignity. It's that you are finding that more often than not, or more often than before, you are aware of your own worth, that you understand that you are worthy of the things that you want, that you are worthy of being in relationships that are energetically equal in terms of you are getting what you give. That is the first sign of alignment, is that sense of dignity. And I tell people all the time, dignity lives in your spine. So even if right now, as you're listening, you just trace your spine all the way up through your neck and you imagine an invisible thread being pulled from the top of your head, how do you sit differently? When you embody this dignity, which is straight and shoulders back, there's more possible in even that embodiment. So that's the first. And the second really is you are able to hear the clarity of your inner wisdom more often. And you understand that that intuition is a feeling that is calm, that is emotionally neutral, that drops in, boom, just like fact. And that there's not a lot of consternation. You sort of learn to just follow that knowing. And like I said, you're logging the evidence, so your brain is coming along for the journey as well because it's starting to believe you. But I think that it's really about, choosing yourself while still living in connection with others through empathy. And that can be tricky. We can get confused, we can backslide. And I want everyone to know that's okay too. That's why we just talked about this word journey. It's a practice.
Mory, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing all of your wisdom with us today. We really appreciate it. And a special thanks to the Arison Group's Essence of Life Radio for hosting us. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Goodnet Effect, Echoes of Inspiration. You can catch all of our episodes and more on our YouTube and Spotify channels. Make sure to go to our website, Goodnet.org, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for more feel good and inspirational content. You can share your thoughts with us there, comment, and tag us. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day, feel inspired, and walk away with something new from this podcast that empowers you and that you can share with the world to make it a better place. I'm your host, Erica Jackson, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
You are listening to the Goodnet Effect, Echoes of Inspiration, a podcast by Goodnet, a part of the Arison Group.